with their pet Islamic theocrats, such as CIA asset Osama bin Laden, through the Lahore-based Bank of Credit and Commerce International, the BCCI, which was the subject of a huge scandal. Where did that business go? Where did that business go? The treatment of KSM is but one small part of the application of torture, not to unearth information about future terrorist attacks, but rather to create a false record to support the specious claims on which the 9/11 wars are premised. This isn't to torture people to find out about terror incidents in the future. It's to get them to follow along with the script that the makers of the public mythology are creating. This propensity was put clearly on public display with news of torture in Egypt of Ibn al-Shaikh al-Libi. The purpose of al-Libi's torture, which Dick Cheney directed, was to produce a false testimony subsequently presented at the United Nations of a non-existent connection linking Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. The purpose of the Anglo-American resort to torture has recently been described by Craig Murray, the former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, who has become a whistleblower exposing the underlying fraud of the global war on terror. Murray was removed from his job when he began to pay attention to what was happening in his posting to prisoners flown in through illegal rendition from many parts of the world. Here's how Murray describes the patterns of torture in Uzbekistan, a key polity in the region's multi-trillion-dollar political boondoggle of oil and gas extraction, as well as pipeline construction. And these are Murray's words. The whole point of the intelligence being obtained under torture was actually to exaggerate the terrorist threats and to exaggerate the strength of al-Qaeda. That was the whole point of why people were being tortured, to confess that they were members of al-Qaeda when they weren't members of al-Qaeda, and to denounce long lists of names as members of al-Qaeda who weren't members of al-Qaeda. And I did put the link there. By putting a focus on the lies and crimes of the Cheney-Bush-Rumsfeld cabal of war profiteers, the trial of Splitting the Sky, together with the formulation of the Calgary Principles, is shaping up as a counterpoint to the upcoming show trial of KSM and others in New York. We invite broad participation in the Calgary proceedings this March from jurists, academics, students, and concerned citizens from around the world. The convergence of interests in and around Splitting the Sky's trial should be seen as one small part, maybe not small, maybe it won't be small, maybe it'll be the center, one part of a global upsurge of popular will flowing from the growing recognition that our formal machineries of domestic law and international relations are leading humanity into a blind alley of death and destruction. The ugly imperatives of might is right will prevail over the rule of law until the people and peoples of the world find a way to overcome the inequities of victor's justice. The core corporations of the military-industrial complex have achieved such a grip lock on the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of most of the world's governments that humanity's slender achievements in instituting democracy are being quickly negated. What meaning does an X on a ballot, on an election ballot, have if voters have been duped by disinformation and smear campaigns, a phrase that I learned studying what happened at Gustafson Lake, a phrase that came off RCMP officers in describing the work that they were doing behind the scenes to plant disinformation and smear, so they wouldn't have to look at the constitutional issues of the land title case in British Columbia, but could instead paint the group pushing these issues as terrorists. Disinformation and smear, that's where I got that term. As they have drawn into, even as they've been drawn into realms of public mythology that are completely disconnected from the realities of how power is exercised, the citizens of Afghanistan are far from alone in suffering the fate of what I call ballot box colonialism. Hence it can be said these days that the most important agencies of the military-industrial complex and the national security state are the media conglomerates. These agencies of propaganda for aggressive war bombard us on a daily basis with mental missiles of psychological warfare. The constant barrage of messages we receive that peace is to be found in war, that freedom is to be found in slavery, that wealth is to be found in indebtedness, and that truth is to be found in lies, is pulling humanity away from our fragile inheritance of reason, rationality, and enlightened discourses on the real menaces we face. Earth-endangered biosphere is the real source of humanity's health, sustainability, and security. That is where we must point much of our remedial attention and creativity. To do so, we must find a way to pull back from the oblivion of modern-day Indian wars that are depriving so many global citizens of life, liberty, and happiness, of peace, order, and good government, as we move into the second decade of the new millennium. Thank you very much.
We'll start now with our main speaker. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you a man who's really inspired me. I'll follow his example, and so here he is, Mr. Split in the Sky.
Yay!
It's good to be here, ladies, gentlemen. It really is good to be here tonight. I actually have to pull this back because I need to move a little bit. I first want to really thank my colleague Tony Hall here for giving that excellent presentation. And Tony and I have been working for a long time putting things together and really attempting to make some kind of difference in trying to affect what we believe is the rule of law. And we live in an age right now where things aren't looking really good at all. If we look at where we're at, especially since Bush, G.W. Bush stole the elections in the year 2000. If we look at how they stole those elections and how they went on the Bush regime and all of the neoconservatives that were part of his administration, there's a cabal that led us down the road to complete tyranny. And I have to analyze what that is and what that meant. And tonight I have to talk to you. I have to appeal to you to understand why it is I tried to arrest this war criminal, this credibly accused war criminal. I certainly had a whole lot better other things to do than to try to attempt to arrest George Bush for war crimes when he came into Calgary. His very first visit outside of the 8 years of tyranny and the millions of peoples that his hands are soaked with blood worldwide. I had to ask myself that if there was this real, what were my intentions? And I have to be very truthful with me, and I have to be truthful with you. And I have to say that, you know, from the very first time I heard that George Bush was coming to Calgary on March the 17th, I was like, well, wait a minute, this guy, and that what really bothered me is I found out that this individual was going to be receiving $200,000 honorarium to speak in Calgary. I got a call from